With the NFL Draft Combine starting this week, we have to study a lot of statistics and measurements with a significant amount of players in this 2026 NFL Draft. Since outside of the first pick, anything is possible. You could see anybody go second. You could see anybody go third to the Cardinals. There's nobody that's a for sure plug-in at those spots at this very moment. And when this combine is set and done, we're going to see a completely different mock draft than this one today. And this one's going to be a placeholder before this draft combine starts this week. And I am very excited to be watching this week because I watched last year. I enjoyed watching it last year, and I'm going to be watching it this year. And I feel like there's just so much more raw talent in the deeper rounds than there was last year. Although last year was very talented in itself, we could see some guys move from the third round to the first round and just fly up, like maybe like a Maxwell Harrison, who had the fastest 40 time and ended up getting taken by the Buffalo Bills late in the first round. And when he was healthy, it ended up working out for them for the most part. And I think he's going to be a great addition for the foreseeable future for this Buffalo Bills team. But let's go ahead and start this draft and just go ahead and go with Fernando Mendoza. We know that the Raiders are going to be going QB. That's the only route that they can go right now. They got rid of Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was really the only person that liked Geno Smith, if we're being honest with ourselves. And Fernando Mendoza is just a plug-in start at that point. Now, he's probably going to have a rough first year, but Fernando Mendoza is to the point that he is just already etched in as his number one pick. He is able to make different cadences and different moves off of what the defense is reading and off the what the defense is giving him in terms of what to read. And he's a very smart QB, and I feel like he is what a lot of teams want in terms of no issues, no outside issues, and just a guy that's coming to play football and showing up day to day and hopefully trying to get better every day. But he could either be a great QB for the league going forward or ends up possibly being a bust. But that's the risk that the Raiders have to take at this point in the spot that they're in. And with a guy who posted a 5.7 big throw rate, you're going to want that on a team like the Raiders, who are possibly going to be looking to maybe trade into the first round again. In my eyes, that would not be a bad idea for them to do in this draft class. But next year is also a pretty good draft class as well, with Jeremiah Smith possibly declaring next year. But moving on to the New York Jets, I've really had just a wins direction of where this could go. And I keep going with defensive line, and I think I'm going to stick with that. But I've gone Ruben Bain. I think today I'm going to go with David Bailey out of Texas Tech. David Bailey is the type of guy, the two of Ruben Bain and David Bailey is just, who do you want more in terms of talent? Do you want the guy who works hard for his talent, who got to the point of being basically unstoppable just off of pure aggression, or the guy who has a natural first step like David Bailey, who you don't really see across the league? Maybe Myles Garrett, or for sure Myles Garrett, but I was trying to think of more people outside of Myles Garrett. But David Bailey could be a great addition to this New York Jets team, and it's a risk that the Jets are going to have to take. It's one of the hottest debates, and I can see it going either way. Me personally, I love Ruben Bain. David Bailey is a very talented prospect, and I think he could be a great player in the league. But to me, I feel like Ruben Bain's going to have a better career, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens going forward. Anything is possible in the NFL draft and in the NFL going forward. But the Arizona Cardinals are up next on the board, and I feel like there's some people that may go Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love is just such an early pick for this, but I wouldn't be against it for them since they just need talent at the end of the day. And QB is obviously not a pick that they can go with. There's not a good amount of QBs in this draft class that's worth really anything outside of Fernando Mendoza, and he's already off the board. So they have to look at either Jeremiah Love or a possible offensive lineman. And to me, I feel like they should just go with not the safe pick, but the pick that they need desperately as of right now at right tackle. And that's going to be Francis out of Miami. Because to me, he was the best right tackle in college football. And some may say the best tackle in college football. And he could fill into the starter spot and maybe even move into guard if they need him to, because the guard position in Arizona isn't much better than tackle. Tackle can possibly hold its own at most points, but that inside of the line in Arizona is just very, very, very vulnerable, and they're gonna have to figure that out in this draft, whether it's at this spot or in the future rounds, which is possible, but I don't know if you want to risk that and keep having seasons that your offensive line is just not doing the trick. But moving on to the Tennessee Titans, I've been split on this with the new head coach hire. It's very difficult to decide on what it is, but they are more than likely, in my eyes, if he's on the board, Ruben Bain is for sure going to Tennessee. I can't imagine the Tennessee Titans passing up on a player like Ruben Bain Jr. at the edge position for this defense, because a lot of the defensive line is on the older side and they need some younger players. The only thing that has me split is that I could imagine that if Robert Saleh had a lower pick than this and Ruben Bain was already taken, he would probably take Sonny Styles, not even Arvell Reese, because at that point, Sonny Styles is the best pure linebacker in this NFL draft, and he is the guy that Robert Saleh would want in the middle of the field and to develop under Robert Saleh, as Fred Wagner basically had one of his best years under Saleh's defensive coordinating. And I feel like Ruben Bain is going to be a great addition, and they just look for that linebacker in the next one. Or also, that's another team that could possibly trade back into the first round, get a Sonny Styles before the Dallas Cowboys possibly get him, because that's the only other team here that I could really imagine gets Sonny Styles. I don't know about the Commanders. That would be the only other one, but then the Dallas Cowboys have the 12th spot. Everybody else is pretty set at linebacker. I mean, the Bengals' whole defense just needs help, but at the end of the day, Ruben Bain goes to Tennessee Titans. We still have Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, Carnell Tate, Sonny Styles. But 4 of the top 5 on this board right now are Ohio State players, and we're probably going to see them all go soon, but it's just insane that it's to the point that Ohio State has that much of a pool in the NFL draft. It's almost like Alabama back in the day, really. But the New York Giants are on the board, and for me, with Harbaugh being the coach and this player being somebody that Harbaugh would love to have on his defense, I can't imagine that he passes up on getting Caleb Downs, because Harbaugh is the same man that got Kyle Hamilton when everybody said it was a little bit too early for him to get him. Kyle Hamilton ends up being one of the best safeties in the league, one of the most diverse safeties in the league, if you will. And I feel like Caleb Downs going to the Giants makes sense, because he's already talked very highly on him. Now, he could definitely go another route. He could definitely go with maybe even wide receiver. But Harbaugh just seems like the type of guy that's going to take Caleb Downs. He's not going to be worried about the positional value. And I feel like Caleb Downs wouldn't be a bad pick at that spot. I think he can translate very well to the NFL when it comes down to it. And at the 6th pick, the Cleveland Browns, I'm pretty sure I had this pick in the last draft, but I'm pretty set on this one as well. And I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Carnell Tate being the man that goes to the Cleveland Browns here. Carnell Tate, I think, is just one of the more well-rounded wide receivers, reliable receivers, if you will, because when it gets down to Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson, they're great receivers in their own right. Reliability is lacking. Obviously, Carnell Tate, we didn't really see him show up against UM. It is what it is in that matter, but I think Carnell Tate could definitely bring a lot of talent to this Cleveland Browns offense that has been in desperate need of it, and join Shedeur Sanders. And I think Carnell Tate could play very well in this system. He is an elite X receiver at the next level, or could be with his size and skill set. And I don't know, I can't really go anywhere else for the Cleveland Browns in that spot. Obviously, offensive line is an option, but drafting an offensive lineman that early, that's not even worth it. Spencer Fano has an ADP of 15.8, ranked 18th on the chart in general, but to me, Spencer at the 6th pick just seems way too early. As the Washington Commanders are on the board. And I feel like this is just a clear pick for them. This man has already dropped far enough for them. And Arvell Reese going to the Washington Commanders adds a significant boost to the young talent that they would need, because this linebacker position, the edge, is just lacking in most areas in terms of talent, in terms of youth, I guess you can say, because most times they are on the older side in the Washington Commanders defense. But it's a great addition for them, and I think Arvell Reese against the run is just one of the best defensive players in this draft class, and he could be so much more if he just develops properly under the Commanders. But we'll have to see what happens with that. I think Arvell Reese at the 7th pick is definitely going to be a steal for them, as the New Orleans Saints are now on the board. And for me, I'm going to have to go with an edge for the New Orleans Saints. I'm not going to go wide receiver. Offensive line is a little bit too early. I'm going to go with Cassius Howe out of Texas A&M. I think that this makes sense because of the drop-off of the edge rusher class after him. Cassius Howe is really the last reliable edge rusher after Ruben Bain and David Bailey. Once you get to Keldrick Folk, you don't really know what's going to happen with a lot of these guys. Akeem Mesidor, a lot of teams are scared because of him being so on the older side in terms of, I think he is 25 years old if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's going to be 25 by the time the draft comes. Gabe Lucas, Sion Young, a lot of these guys are good, but they're not first-round talents. And I feel like Cassius Howe is the guy that they should be getting, with their defensive line getting a little bit weaker over time. And I think they just have to keep adding depth to that defensive line that has been infamous in New Orleans. Cassius Howe is more than likely going to be a great addition for the Saints, as the Kansas City Chiefs are on the board. And for me, obviously, if this man's on the board, I think the Chiefs are not going to be on the clock very long. It's going to be very clear what they go with, and I feel like it's going to be Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love paired up with Patrick Mahomes is going to be a sight to see. As much as I don't like the Chiefs, as much as the Chiefs are just, I don't know, just kind of boring for me to watch in terms of them just getting away with a lot of penalties at points, and penalties in crucial times. I understand that they may have less penalties than some other teams, but in crucial times, it just always seems convenient. But Jeremiah Love is a player that would fit right in with that offense. Coming out of Notre Dame, a team that hasn't gotten a lot of love lately or recently, going to another team that also hasn't gotten a lot of love, I feel like this could be a great pairing with them trying to find their true new identity going forward, with Rashee Rice, with Xavier Worthy, and now Jeremiah Love, with an offensive line that they're trying to rebuild in its own way. But again, this isn't a spot to be taking that, and I feel like that's going to be something that they focus on either in free agency or in the drafts coming up, because Patrick Mahomes could miss a part of this year, and Jeremiah Love has some time to develop in the meantime. And for me, that's going to be a great fantasy pick if he ends up going to the Chiefs, because I feel like they're going to utilize him a lot with the other two running backs, Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, going into free agency. As the Cincinnati Bengals are now on the clock, and I think that they're going to reach here, in my opinion. I mean, that it just makes the most sense for them because that's just what it is. And I think Spencer Fano is going to go to the Cincinnati Bengals. They're in a spot that they can't really go with anything else but offensive line. Joe Burrow keeps talking about how he's going to play until he stops enjoying football, and he seems like he wants to die when he plays behind that offensive line, because he just looks so frustrated and just doesn't like playing. Whenever it comes to getting hit, the amount of times that he gets hit, there's a certain point where you get tired of it as a QB, and you just want to have time to be able to get the ball to the receiver that you want to get it to. So I feel like Spencer's going to be the pick for them off of just pure talent. Obviously, he had a down year this past year, but the year before that, he had, I think, one of the best seasons that we've seen out of a tackle. And I feel that he can really fill in whatever they need him to. Obviously, right tackle is his position of choice, or position that he excels at, because that's where he plays the majority of the time. As you can see, all his snaps in the past year was right tackle. But right tackle could be still his situation, or they could move him into guard for the time being until their current right tackle, I think it's Oh, Amarius Mims. Amarius Mims is their current right tackle who they just drafted as well. So you kind of have to pick who's going to be the one that goes inside. Maybe it's Amarius Mims since he didn't have a great season on the right side. And you can trust Spencer Fanu to be that right tackle that you can rely on. And Amarius Mims is just an oversized guard. It could work out. It could definitely work out as the Miami Dolphins are now on the board. And I'm going to go a different route than I've been going recently with them because I've gone with corner, which is Mansour Delane and Jermon McCoy. I've been leaning on Mansour for a while. I think I'm going to go a different route and go with somebody who they're going to try to make into basically a star in their offense. With the amount of rumors that I've heard since the last time that I made a mock draft, I feel like it's only right. And it's not going to be Mekhi Lemon. It's going to be Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. The Miami Dolphins haven't been afraid of picking a player who has had some history with injuries. And with Jordan Tyson, I think he could definitely excel with a new young quarterback who's going to be relying on him a lot. And he's going to be getting the snaps and the targets. Obviously, more if Jalen Waddle is out and they get another first-round pick, which could be possible in this draft itself. Maybe the Dolphins even use it to move up into, say, a top 3 spot. I just don't think this is the draft to do that, obviously. I feel like if they trade Jalen Waddle, they should try to get a first-round pick for next year. Because if you have 2 first-round picks in next year's draft, you could be golden for the foreseeable future. Because you could trade those 2 picks to maybe move up for a QB. Or you get 2 very high picks and you're able to get a Jeremiah Smith and an Arch Manning. And the Dolphins are set. But we'll see if the new Dolphins front office has the competency to be able to do that. But the Dallas Cowboys are going to be the next team on the board. And for me, the Dallas Cowboys need a clear linebacker. After they lost their linebacker, oh my gosh, I think Leighton Vander Esch, I'm hoping that I said his name correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm very sorry to Cowboys fans, if anything, but he unfortunately retired a little bit earlier than a lot of people expected him to. They need a new clear linebacker in the middle of the field, and they tried to trade for some with a Logan Wilson. I just feel like you have to move forward with a younger team. You've already kind of gone in that direction, trading away Micah Parsons, who's already young as is, but just not paying him and giving yourself some cap flexibility, I guess you can say. I'm going to go with Sonny Styles again for the Dallas Cowboys. I just can't imagine them passing up on him if he gets to that point. Sonny Styles going past the Dallas Cowboys makes no sense for me whatsoever. And it just seems like the clear pick for them. And going into the future, it could be a great pick for them. And Sonny Styles' measurements have, or just statistics in general, have measured up to Fred Wagner whenever he was in his BYU days, to be quite honest with you. His positively graded pass rate is only 4% higher than Fred Wagner's when he was at BYU. I mean, his run rate is also just right there with him along the way. They're like neck and neck, and I feel like that is the type of guy that the Dallas Cowboys are going to be looking for. A Fred Wagner maybe, and Sonny Styles could be that if they let him develop properly. That's what a lot of teams just leave behind, that they have to let these guys develop. These are young players. These are young kids, really, at the end of the day. And Sonny Styles could be a Fred Wagner, but he could also just be a middle-of-the-pack linebacker if they don't let him excel and learn and do all this type of stuff and just trust him to be able to move forward. But I think Sonny Styles could be a great pick for the Dallas Cowboys, as the LA Rams couldn't be thanking their lucky stars any more than they are right now. This draft has basically fallen exactly how they wanted it to, because they're able to get basically a top corner in the draft class with Mansour Delane. To me, Mansour Delane is the clear number one, because Jermon McCoy missing basically the majority of last year leaves a lot to be desired, and then Avion Terrell's the next best case here, and Mansour Delane just had a tremendous season at LSU after coming from Boston College, if I'm not mistaken. I think I may be wrong. Again, correct me if I'm wrong if I said the wrong college, but I don't know why I have that in my head. But Mansour Delane just is an insane corner coming out of LSU. He allowed a catch on just 40% of passes in this past year in coverage, and this has been in my mock drafts, obviously, as the Dolphins pick, because me as a Dolphins fan, I want them to get a corner with how weak that corner room was last year. But at this point with the rebuild, I could care less if they go corner or wide receiver. I wouldn't be mad if they went wide receiver for sure. But Mansour Delane going to the Rams helps them and their Super Bowl aspirations going forward, because that was a big issue in terms of them getting beat downfield by, say, a Seattle Seahawks with JSN. JSN had some of his biggest games against them, and Puka Nacua would have some big games, but that Seattle Seahawks defense is just so much better than the LA Rams defense at this point in time. But moving forward, we go with the Baltimore Ravens at the 14th spot. And if Declan Doyle brings over the scheme that the Chicago Bears deployed in 2025, then the Ravens will have 3 wide receivers more than they really have ever had. But I think that right now they don't have the talent to be able to run 3 wide receivers. They don't. And at the end of the day, that leaves them in a spot that where else would they go other than Makai Lemon being here already when your needs are guard, defensive line, and wide receiver? Cassius Howell is already gone. You're going to go Keldrick Falk over Makai Lemon, who's already on the board? I don't think so. We're going to go ahead and go with Makai Lemon. Peter Woods is also a choice, but I definitely think that if the Ravens have a shot here, they're going to want to get Makai Lemon next to Zay Flowers. And Makai Lemon won't feel as much pressure as a lot of wide receivers coming out of the draft would, because a lot of teams expect him to be the wide receiver 1, which it's possible that he can, but Zay Flowers has been the wide receiver 1 for the Ravens for some time now. And a Lamar Jackson, Makai Lemon, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry offense is a pretty good offense. They need to re-sign Linderbaum, but I don't think that they will at the end of the day. But moving forward to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the 15th spot, I think they will take the risk and go ahead and go with Jermod McCoy. They probably would rather get one of the Ohio State linebackers, obviously, but being this deep into the draft, Sonny Styles is not making it down here, and they could lose their cornerback in Jamal Dean this offseason in free agency. Jermod McCoy missed all of the 2025 season, but in 2024, obviously, he had one of the best years that a corner can have. It's almost like a Spencer Fowler type of pick here, but Spencer actually played last year, was decent, but wasn't as great as a lot of teams thought that he would be. But Jermod McCoy could definitely come back from his injury that he's taken basically the entire season off for and come right into his own, in all honesty. But Jermod McCoy going to the Bucs with no linebackers on the board makes the most sense to me, as the New York Jets are now on the board with the pick that they got from the Sauce Gardner trade at the 16th pick. And the Jets continue to upgrade their defense with the second of their first round draft picks, adding some talent in the interior defensive line. Woods is coming off one of his not so great seasons, and I think PFF would agree with that as well. Yeah, kind of a trajectory that you don't want to see, but at the end of the day, Peter Woods is still possibly going to be a great prospect coming out of this NFL draft. Again, players that we have to see in the combine include the Clemson players. The Clemson team in general had a bad year. You have to see their measurements. You have to see what happens. You have to see the statistics that they get. And I feel like Peter Woods would make sense for the New York Jets to go with after trading their defensive interior in Quinnen Williams to the Dallas Cowboys, as the Detroit Lions are here at the 17th spot, and I've had them taking a plethora of different edge rushers at the end of the day, and I think I'm just going to go with the pick that I feel is probably going to nip me in the butt in terms of what I've gone with in the past and said about this man in the past, and that's going to be Keldrick Falk. I guess that a lot of scouts are more of a fan of him than I am. I just don't love him going to anybody in the first round. Second round makes sense for me, but he carries a lot of risk as a first rounder because he didn't prove to be an elite pass rusher in college, and that's concerning for me. There were flashes, and he hasn't even turned 21, so he doesn't turn 21 until September either. He has plenty of time to develop. I think it's something that they could take a risk on in the Detroit Lions since they already have their guy in Aiden Hutchinson as a star. Keldrick Fall could be a great addition if he ends up developing properly. But moving on to the Minnesota Vikings at the 18th pick. I think that this is a pick that they could really go in many directions. But to me, their best case scenario is going with the corner. And Avion Terrell is a player who played 1,500 defensive snaps in the past 2 years. And in addition to his coverage skills, he is willing to also be a run defender, which you look for in a corner because you don't want a cornerback that's not going to be able to stop the run if it ends up coming to him dead on and he's not able to make the tackle because he's a cornerback. That's just not the day and age that we're in. They need to have that versatility going forward. And Avion Terrell has that. And I feel like sometimes he is a better run defender than he is in coverage. But at the end of the day, he's just well-versed. There he is. He's just well-versed in general. And I think he can develop properly in a Minnesota Vikings team that has a lot of young players now, or a lot of young players coming in now, and joining Dallas Turner from last year, as the Carolina Panthers are here on the board. And again, I go with somebody who I feel like flashed at the Senior Bowl for sure, and he returned later in the year to Florida after missing time with injury. And to me, him getting paired up with Derrick Brown just makes the most sense. Caleb Banks out of Florida obviously is who I'm talking about. I liked him coming out of the draft in my way too early mock draft before. I still like him now. It's just that injury obviously runs some concern. But again, that Senior Bowl was tremendous for him in terms of his trajectory. Some people didn't even have him going in the first round sometimes. Some people had him going very late in the first round. You can't really put that on someone who missed the entirety of last year, and then the year before he had some promise. He had a significant amount of promise, and I think that he could definitely be a steal for the Panthers if he ends up playing well next year. But the Dallas Cowboys have the Green Bay pick at the 20th spot, and again, another Clemson player that their production dropped significantly this past year. I don't know what to depend on for this Clemson prospects that they have. It makes me hesitate slightly. He had a 15.5% pass rush win rate. TJ Parker, I really can't wait for this week because I really need to see a lot of players, because there's so many players that could really jump all over the place when it comes to this mock draft season and NFL draft in general. But I'm going to go ahead and go with TJ Parker for the Dallas Cowboys, who got rid of Micah Parsons. This is literally the pick one of the picks that they got for the Micah Parsons trade. And at the end of the day, they're going to keep trying to find those edge rushers. And he's going to go across from Donovan Azarigu. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I know he's out of Boston College. And they're going to try to fill in that defensive line to be the best that it can be now that Micah Parsons isn't there. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are now on the board at the 21st spot. And for me, I think it's pretty clear what they go with. I had them going with Ty Simpson in my very first mock draft back, and I got heat for that. But Denzel Boston makes the most sense here, with their wide receiver position being very scarce. Very, very, very scarce. In terms of outside of DK Metcalf, who do you have? Outside of DK Metcalf in terms of receiving options, who do you have? Outside of, I don't even know, maybe even the offensive line, who are your young players on offense? You have a Caleb Johnson. QB. Running back has Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, who they're probably going to pick both or keep both. And Caleb Johnson's going to continue being a third stringer. I just think they go with Denzel Boston. I know that they have Roman Wilson. I'm sure that a lot of Steelers fans may like Roman Wilson. I don't know why. I don't know. I just don't find him as reliable as a possible Denzel Boston coming to Pittsburgh. and he would just give them a different type of receiver when he hauled in 79.6% of his contested targets. I'm going to have to go with Denzel Boston for them. I can't imagine another way. And another team that I can't imagine them going any other way but offensive line. This guard out of Penn State, who I still haven't figured out how to say his name, is the most obvious need that they have. Their tackle position was weak because both tackles got injured. Rashad Slater and Joel are going to be back next year. Guard is a desperate need. They need to avoid Justin Herbert getting hit as much as he does. Some people say that he should have been more in the running for MVP, with him basically having no time in the pocket whatsoever in comparison to a Matthew Stafford, who at most points had a good amount of time with his offensive line stepping up, and Drake May, who also at points had his offensive line stepping up. Obviously not in the Super Bowl because the Seattle Seahawks makes every team look like a high school JV team. But moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles. I've gone this route for some times now, and it just makes the most sense since Lane Johnson is going to be 36 years old. You need to start figuring out what's the future of your offensive line. And they started that. They have. And at the end of the day, you need somebody that's going to be able to develop behind him. And who better than having Caden Proctor, who has been reliable for Alabama, but could be even more reliable for the Eagles if he learns from Lane Johnson and is able to absorb and basically learn everything that Lane Johnson's been able to do for the past couple years. And at the end of the day, he could possibly fill in some spots on this offensive line, but to me, he's the long-term replacement for Lane Johnson if everything goes well. And I just don't see them putting him anywhere else but the tackle position going forward. But until Lane Johnson retires, Caden Proctor is probably going to be his second string. As the Cleveland Browns are back on the board, and the Cleveland Browns are probably not the happiest right now because they wanted to take a Caden Proctor. They wanted to take a Spencer Fanu. They wanted to take, obviously, Francis, but Francis is probably not dropping outside of the top 10. The latest is more than likely the Cincinnati Bengals. But to me, I'm split between them going with Caleb Lomu and Monroe Freeling. And it's not an easy choice, to be honest with you. It's really, what do you prefer? And at the end of the day, I feel like the Cleveland Browns struggled significantly more in protecting the pass. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Monroe Freeling for the Cleveland Browns. I'm hesitating a little bit on that, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with it. Monroe Freeling for Georgia played greatly for Gunnar Stockton this past year, and he improved over the past 2 seasons. I just feel like this Browns is too desperate not to go with someone who excelled on one side of the offense. As the Chicago Bears are here at the 25th spot, and at the end of the day, this guy may never be an elite pass rusher, but the run was something that the Bears struggled against this past year. Teams were running all over the Bears, and to me, having this run defender down the middle who's 326 pounds, Caden McDonald out of Ohio State makes sense to me for the Chicago Bears. I don't love that he's not a even solid pass rusher at the end of the day, but his run defending, again, is just something that you have to take into account with being a team like the Bears who just need somebody on that interior that's going to stop the run. As the Buffalo Bills, we're really just trying to throw a dart at the board and see who's going to be the wide receiver that they get. Because at the end of the day, with all the talk that they've had about Keon Coleman not being the guy that they wanted, Keon Coleman being a Sean McDermott guy, I can't imagine that they don't go wide receiver. And to me, we could see somebody fly up the board. And I think it's going to be Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. Reliable guy for Fernando Mendoza. it's going to be so difficult between him and Casey Concepcion. But Omar Cooper averaged 2.55 yards per route and dropped just 4.2% of the catchable passes thrown his way in 2025. I can't imagine him not being the perfect fit to be a possible number one wide receiver for this Buffalo Bills team, who just continues to try to find it. They could possibly sign a Mike Evans. It's possible. It's definitely possible. But what's the solution in that long term for your star QB in Josh Allen? You have to start figuring out what is going to be that. And Amari Cooper Jr. is going to be a possibility of that wide receiver one. And we're going to have back-to-back wide receivers because the San Francisco 49ers appear to be on track to trade Brandon Ayuk in this offseason, and they could lose Jauan Jennings in free agency as well. So that leaves two wide receiver spots that had a pretty significant hold on the team. And obviously Brandon Ayuk didn't play this past year, but Jauan Jennings showed up at most points, although he was a little toxic, maybe a lot toxic. But at the end of the day, I think that Casey Concepcion could definitely be great for the 49ers because him against man coverage was great. And I feel like in terms of contested catches, there's Denzel Boston and then there's Casey Concepcion. And I think that's what they're going to be looking for. With the guys that are going to be leaving, those were the guys that they were able to trust in contested situations. And he's definitely going to be the type of guy that you can rely to get the first down if necessary on a 3rd and 10, really 3rd and 9 if you need. But the Houston Texans are next on the board. And in the home stretch of this draft, I'm going to have another tackle going off the board. And somebody who possibly is going to kick into guard maybe should just add the depth that the Houston Texans are going to be looking for on this offensive line, because it just seems like if CJ Stroud is under a significant amount of distress, he's going to throw the ball, and he's going to throw the ball into an interception. You can't really have that in terms of a QB, but at the end of the day, it's your QB of the future. I don't imagine that they're not going to re-sign him when it comes down to it, and I just feel like he would probably fit better as a guard, and I think Caleb Lomu would fit into this Houston Texans team for sure. But I don't know if he's going to be a tackle in the league. But we'll have to see what the Houston Texans end up deciding. As the LA Rams are back on the board with their 29th pick. And at this spot, maybe Rams fans won't like it, but to me, it makes the most sense with Matthew Stafford announcing that he's going to be coming back for the 2026 season. That just makes me feel like he's going to be retiring possibly after next season, me personally. And when you're at a point that Ty Simpson is probably the best pick in this spot, in your situation, and with the players that are on the board, you already got Mansour Delane earlier in the draft. Why not go with the QB prospect who could unlock his NFL potential playing under a player like Matthew Stafford? Now, you have to communicate it to Matthew Stafford so he doesn't get blindsided by it and he actually helps the guy out. But Ty Simpson could definitely get some things figured out when it comes down to decision making. Matthew Stafford developed over the time that he was in the NFL for sure in that department, and Ty Simpson is going to need every bit of knowledge that Matthew Stafford can give him. But moving on to the Denver Broncos at the 30th spot, I feel like this Evan Ingram experiment just was so disappointing. And on top of that, Sadiq's 2025 season was also very disappointing. But I'm expecting him to have a great pre-draft process, and a lot of teams are going to be looking at him as a possible tight end. Maybe even the Miami Dolphins. Now, I hope that they don't go tight end in the first round, because they should have done that last year with a Tyler Warren. I'm not sure. Was Tyler Warren on the board? I think that the Colts had the pick after us, if I'm not mistaken. I can't necessarily remember with focusing on this one right now. But yeah, we definitely saw firsthand that the Evan Ingram whole Joker type player experiment just really didn't work out. And Kenyon Sadiq could come in as a great value pick at the 30th spot. Again, just didn't have a great season, but I can imagine that he's going to test well, and his run blocking is definitely something that you have to focus on as well with the Denver Broncos team, who is really leaning towards running the ball a lot more with the RJ Harvey, and just being able to get those quick routes out to the tight end, which I feel like Kenyon Sadiq could handle or could manage under that situation. But the New England Patriots are here at the 31st spot, the runner-ups to the Super Bowl champions. And with much of the post-Super Bowl narrative being about the left tackle of Will Campbell, a lot of people are saying that he's possibly going to kick inside to guard. I just don't see it. I don't see it. Mike Vrabel's pretty set on him being the left tackle of the future for the Patriots. I think he just obviously needed this type of season to push him forward into the next. But I think that if that's the case, they need to go with the guard to be able to fill in that left guard position, or the guard position in general. And that is going to be Emmanuel Bregman from Oregon, if I'm able to find him. Yes, Emmanuel Bregman, who has been skyrocketing up a lot of teams' draft boards, but at the end of the day, with a team like the Patriots, that they have like minimal needs. Obviously, edge is going to be a need, but they can get edge at any point in the second round for sure. There's so much talent that could go later on in the second round that would still be worth their while. And I think after the draft combine, I will be dropping a two-round mock draft, just so you know, and for all the people that are at this point in the video. But the 32nd overall pick of the Seattle Seahawks, for me, the Super Bowl champions could lose their starting cornerback in Tariq Woolen in free agency, and it wouldn't shock me to see them add a cornerback early in this draft. Keionte Scott, I'm between him and Brandon Sykes from South Carolina, but Keionte Scott stepped up for the Hurricanes and had a tremendous season in comparison to the past years in what was really a slot role that he excelled in. But he can play almost anywhere that they need him to. And to be honest, Tariq Woolen on the outside wasn't as reliable as maybe a lot of people. I mean, in my opinion, he wasn't as reliable as really the rest of the defense in Seattle. I feel like if you saw that somebody got burnt, it was Tariq Woolen. And Keionte Scott may be in some of those situations, but he also wouldn't be getting unnecessary penalty calls in terms of the taunting that he decided to do when they already had fourth down and Tariq Woolen just decided to talk crap to the sidelines. But it's difficult because I really want to go Brandon Sykes, and that might be my pick going forward if Keionte Scott possibly doesn't measure up well in this pre-draft process. But I'm going to go with the Keionte Scott. At the end of the day, it's probably just because I've seen him play way more than I've seen Brandon Sykes play. Oh, that's difficult. That's difficult. It really is, because I'm not sure if the Seahawks are going to be looking for a slot corner. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I feel like they're going to be looking more for an outside corner. I'm going to go with Brandon Sykes. I was really set on Keionte Scott for a good minute, but Brandon Sykes just makes the most sense at this spot. Keionte Scott is probably going to be a second-round draft pick, although I could see him sneak up into the first round if a team really likes him at the slot corner position. But that is going to do it for this mock drafts. Obviously, going forward, we may have some different mock drafts, like trades, and just different scenarios. 2-round mock draft, maybe a 3-round mock draft before the draft. I haven't seen those perform very well whenever I've done them. I don't know why, maybe because it's almost too long. But you let me know if you want to see that, and while you're letting me know, like the video so more people can see it, please. Let's grow this audience as much as we can before the NFL draft. may do a draft live stream, if anything, but also subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of these mock drafts. We're going to be putting these out every week, I would say, especially coming into this time of the year that we're really getting into the NFL drafts, and it's coming quick. It's coming quick. We're already at the draft combine, and I'm just excited to get into this process even more. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.